Someone collapses on the sidewalk in front of you. 20 people are standing there. Nobody moves. You assume someone else will help. But the real answer is far stranger than simple indifference. Your brain is not broken in that moment. It is doing exactly what millions of years of living in groups trained it to do. You are reading the crowd before you read the emergency. You are checking faces, not the body on the ground. And the more faces you check, the less likely you are to act at all. This is not a flaw in your character. It is a calculation your brain runs in under a second without asking your permission. In 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in New York. Newspapers reported that dozens of neighbors heard her cries and did nothing. The story horrified the country. How could so many people listen to someone suffering and stay silent? Two psychologists, John Darley and Latane, refused to accept the easy answer. They didn't believe people had simply become cruel. They believed something colder and more mechanical was happening inside the human mind. So they built an experiment to test it. They put a single participant in a room with an intercom, supposedly talking to other participants in separate rooms. Partway through the conversation, one voice began to choke and call for help, sounding like a seizure. When the participant believed they were the only one who could hear it, they rushed to help almost every time. But when they believed several other people could also hear the cry, fewer than a third of them acted at all. Nothing about the emergency had changed, only the number of witnesses had changed, and that single variable rewired the response completely. Darley and Latane called this diffusion of responsibility. Your brain does something close to division. It takes the moral weight of a crisis and quietly splits it among everyone present. With one witness, you carry the full weight. With 20 witnesses, you carry a 20th. And a 20th of urgency rarely feels like urgency at all. Why would evolution build a mind that does this? Think about your ancestors moving through small, dangerous landscapes. A group meant safety. A group also meant specialization. Not every person needed to react to every threat, because someone else usually would. Constant individual vigilance burns enormous energy. A brain that quietly outsources some emergencies to the group is a brain that conserves resources for the threats it truly cannot avoid. That instinct served you well on the savannah. It serves you far worse in a crowd of strangers on a city street where everyone is running the exact same outsourcing calculation at the exact same time, and the math collapses into silence. There is a second force at work, one that has nothing to do with energy and everything to do with fear. It's called pluralistic ignorance. Picture yourself in that crowd again. You glance at the faces around you. Nobody looks alarmed. So you assume this must not actually be an emergency, and you adjust your own expression to match theirs. But every other person in that crowd is doing the exact same thing, scanning your calm face and concluding the same false thing. A room full of secretly worried people can look, from the inside, like a room full of people who feel nothing is wrong. In 1969, Latane teamed up with Judith Rodin to test this directly. They staged a woman appearing to fall and injure herself behind a screen in earshot of participants. Alone, most people went to check on her almost immediately. But paired with a stranger who had been instructed to stay still and show no concern, participants were dramatically less likely to respond. They weren't reading the emergency anymore. They were reading the stranger's face. You have done this. Maybe not with a collapse on a sidewalk, but with a flickering smoke alarm you assumed was nothing because your roommate kept scrolling their phone. Or a colleague crying in a meeting that everyone quietly pretended not to notice. Your calm became their calm. Their calm became yours. Nobody lied. Everybody was simply reading the wrong signal. Does that mean groups are always worse than individuals in a crisis? Not quite, and this is where the story gets stranger. In 2011, a researcher named Peter Fisher led a sweeping review of more than 50 bystander studies conducted over 4 decades. He found something the original theory hadn't fully predicted. In situations involving extreme physical danger, where the threat to the bystander themselves was unmistakable, the presence of more people sometimes increased the chance someone intervened, not decreased it. More witnesses meant more potential allies. Strength in numbers could outweigh diffusion of responsibility, but only when the danger was severe and unambiguous enough that nobody could mistake it for nothing. In other words, your brain isn't simply lazy in a crowd. It is running a constant, half-conscious risk assessment. How bad is this really? How sure am I? How exposed would I be if I acted and was wrong? Ambiguity is the real enemy here, more than the size of the crowd itself. A clear, unmistakable emergency cuts through diffusion of responsibility. A blurry, uncertain one gets swallowed by it. That's why a fight breaking out in plain view often gets intervention fast, while a quiet, slumped figure on a park bench can be stepped around by 100 people, each one assuming sleep instead of danger, each one borrowing the assumed indifference of the last. So what do you actually do with this knowledge? Psychologists who study this effect point to one strange but reliable trick. If you are ever the one in trouble, do not shout, "Somebody help me," into an undivided crowd. Point at one person. Describe what they're wearing. Say, "You in the blue jacket, call an ambulance." The moment you collapse a crowd into one named individual, you collapse the diffusion along with it. Responsibility stops being divisible. It lands entirely on them, and people respond to that kind of direct, undivided weight almost every time. And if you are the bystander, the fix is just as counterintuitive. The instinct to glance around and read the room is exactly the instinct to interrupt. The first person to break the calm, even slightly, even by simply asking, "Is everything okay?" changes the entire signal the crowd is reading. You don't have to be certain. You only have to be the first uncertain face that finally says something out loud. This isn't really a story about a crowded sidewalk in New York decades ago. It's a story about every group chat you've sat in while someone made a joke that didn't feel right and nobody said anything. Every meeting where a bad decision moved forward because everyone assumed somebody smarter in the room would object first. Every time you waited for someone else's face to tell you how to feel instead of trusting the discomfort sitting quietly in your own chest. The crowd was never the problem. The silence borrowed from each other was. Next time you feel that hesitation, that quiet scan of the room before you decide whether something is actually wrong, remember what your brain is really doing. It isn't telling you the truth about the emergency. It's only telling you what everyone else seems to think the truth is. Someone collapses on the sidewalk in front of you. 20 people are standing there. This time, you already know what's really happening inside every single one of them. And that's exactly why you're the one who finally moves.